Welcoming to the RageRoom YouTube podcast. We have Bizzie Gold here. Bizzie is actually the creator of one of the top mental health podcasts in the world, aside from her incredible podcast Decoded, which I listen to because we all have mental health issues, right? We all have the mental struggles, especially being a female entrepreneur. But the thing that I want to talk about today and start our conversation with is the break method and how you went all in on this, betting on yourself, knowing that you weren't going to be able to collect revenue in your pocket from this, and why that's so important to understand as somebody who has a millionaire mindset. And I would love to dive into what your mindset was around that, going into that, because that's the decision that most people won't make.
So I started Break Method in 2014. And I always joke that it started on a napkin while I was having an argument, but that really is the origin story of what I created. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, if they reflect back and they truly created a business that was a solution to a problem, typically the origin story of your business comes from some sort of hardship or wound or state where you are down and out.
Yeah.
And that has certainly been the case for every business that I've brought into the world, and Break was certainly not my first. But Break was born out of a really deep type of pain that I had experienced over and over again. And I think often you have to get to the end of yourself and get down on your knees and be willing to surrender it all. And I had hit a place from 2013 to 2014. My oldest daughter's biological father committed suicide when she was maybe 2.5, something like that. And that whole year of my life was so tumultuous. I had built another business prior to that that was really growing. I was training all these celebrities. And on one hand, from the outside looking in, it was the most successful I'd ever been. It was the most money I had ever made. It was the most access I had ever had. But it was also the darkest moments of my adult life behind closed doors. And I think sometimes people forget that when you're looking at what's presented on social media. Everyone's kind of going for the look, the access, the money, the cars, or freedom, which we're going to put that in air quotes. I think people think of access to money as financial freedom, but what people often end up creating by accident is an entrepreneurial slave ship where you effectively make yourself a slave to this business that you're creating. So I was kind of straddled in between these two worlds of starting off before I built that business to raising my special needs daughter on food stamps to all of a sudden making 30K in a month and not even really conceptually understanding what that was. I remember the first month I made 30K as just an individual that had no employees. I was like, oh my God, it was so much abundance. I didn't even know what to do with myself. But simultaneous to that, I was living in the darkest period of my marriage with a special needs daughter who was just constantly sick. So I think a lot of times when you think about the origin story of a business, people don't often get to look under the hood of the hardship and the juxtaposition that's often underneath that. And it was one of the roughest periods of my life. So for 2 years before I created Break Method, I was straddling these two worlds of the kind of broken heart, marriage failing husband with severe psychiatric issues, eventually leading to him committing suicide, to then me getting on my knees, raising a special needs daughter on my own, while also having this business that was growing and successful, and just saying, how am I going to ever survive? How am I going to scale my company and hire employees when I'm just struggling mentally, emotionally at home? And eventually, when I had really gotten to that place where I was willing to just surrender it all and literally go to God and be like, what am I going to do? I cannot sustain this.
Yeah.
That was when all of a sudden rapid fire, all these literally just idea after idea. And I had this period of probably 2 months of just rapid fire ideation that was all very solution centric. And the way that my spiritual gifting has always worked has always been to receive visuals and diagrams and words. So literally just received this entire system because I was ready for it. I was begging for the medicine that I was eventually going to carry through into the world. And I was sitting at a cafe in Malibu with one of my closest friends, and we were arguing about whether the nature of emotion was energetically feminine or masculine. And I was very clear, which I still am to this day, that emotion is actually very masculine energetic. And she was countering that position. And in that moment, I all of a sudden started drawing this diagram, which now I have like, tattooed on my wrist. I know so many people that have it tattooed on their wrist. And
Love.
it was the keystone of my teaching. And it's funny that that was the first thing that came through. Now we're like 12 years later or something, and it's still that much of a fundamental principle. But it was this idea that we get stuck in these repetitive triggered states by which we respond with some sort of biochemical reaction in the form of an emotion, and that it's often not actually directly correlated to what actually happened in objective reality in that present moment. We're often reacting to something that's really pinging back to something from the past, and we've just superimposed our lens from the past onto this moment, and that we're not really seeing as objectively as we like to believe that we are. So in having this kind of quasi argument with her, we actually got somewhere really productive where I think she saw my perspective of I see emotion and intuition actually as opposites, and they are to me the masculine feminine counterpoint. I think emotion is very masculine. It's very immediate cause and effect. It's very reactive. There's a lot of force behind it. Whereas intuition is more of a meandering stream. It's willing to take into consideration the context and nuance of the present moment. It's willing to look forward into the future, maybe even in, again, that more intuitive, prophetic sort of state of like, what are the long-term consequences of this decision, and kind of allowing yourself to exist in that moment, in that liminal space, to try to play it out before you respond. I think big picture where we're supposed to be as human beings is to learn how to repattern our emotional responses to be able to access intuitive response, which I think when we're able to navigate to that place, we make far better decisions. Our decisions don't end up being a byproduct of all of our wounds. Instead, they become something that was well thought out or strategic, or in some cases, really taking a bet on ourselves when all of the physical evidence says do not do this. And you're like, roll the dice anyways, I'm going to take a chance on myself. I think a lot of that is where we not only see the most growth, but that's where a lot of the healing exists. We have to get out of those repetitive cycles and into something brand new. In my work, I call these rebellion zones, which I feel like as soon as you're like, come onto the rage room, I'm like, oh, she's gonna love rebellion zones. Because each one of us have these areas that our brain pattern convinces us to avoid or to put up walls around. And really, those are all of the places that we're very much being called in. And when we do those with the right strategy and the right sort of rewiring steps, our life changes so radically, so quickly. And thankfully, it ends up being sustainable because of the way neuroscience works. So
It's insane that this pain that you have was alchemized in such an abundant way. And I feel like I work with a lot of women who oftentimes they'll come to me in their most painful seasons. And the first thing that they often say is like, I'm scared of my own success. How do you feel about that when you hear women say, oh, I haven't stepped into my next edge or my next season because I actually fear my own power. I feel how powerful I could be. I fear success that I could create and would I be able to hold it? A lot of times I'll say that's a crock of shit. And I would love to
yeah,
hear,
as you were saying that, I already
yeah,
was like, that's a crock of shit.
I would love to
I already
hear
don't believe it.
your perception on it because I feel like whether we say that in that exact context or not, we've all been there. We've all been like, well, what excuse can I come up with to not take action on this and take radical responsibility that actually sounds good, right? Oh, I fear my
Mhm.
power and my success. It's wow, that sounds like a really good excuse to the other people. But
When it
the,
also, it's a false
yeah,
sense of humility too.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's bullshit. If somebody said that to me, I'd immediately dig deeper and dissect where that's actually coming from.
I'd love to hear how you work with your clients on that
Mhm.
because I do feel like we're in this season, especially in the personal development industry, where a lot of people do like to say things that they think will sound more powerful, but still masking the excuse, still masking the reason not to step forward into taking, because it really is, say it out loud, I am just terrified to fucking take radical responsibility. I'm terrified to face the
Or I'm
things
terrified
and
that if I commit, I'll find out I actually do suck at this and
there's
I will
nobody else to
fail.
blame. Right? It's
Yeah.
like when, or we hire the mentor or we hire the coach and then we have them to blame. So it's like
Mhm.
when we really are sitting naked in a room with nothing by ourselves and we're like, wow, can I take responsibility for everything that I'm about to do? And then people will come up with the string on of buzzwords that actually makes the excuse sound better. So I'd love to know how you feel you work through your clients or through with your clients through this shit. Wow, if I could get my tongue out of my ass, and how you see them benefit in the end after you do you collapse time? Or are you just like, this is actually what's going on and we're just going to close that gap right now? Or do you ease them into it?
I definitely don't ease anybody into anything, but it's also not a collapsing either. There's a very specific rewiring process that does take time and consistency. So it's not
Mm,
necessarily collapsing, but it's definitely not soft either. I think often people find my work really confronting and exposing, which I think is why it works, frankly. I think if you look at it as a foil to the current mental health paradigm, which can be very placating and soft, and it allows the client's experience or preferences to guide the trajectory of what's happening. Mine's the exact opposite of that. I often tell people that when you do break method, you're effectively agreeing to be a rat in a maze, and we will be intentionally triggering you in this maze until you get out the other side and you're
mm,
a radically restored person. I don't ever say that people become somebody different, because I do think break method is a process of restoration. It's returning you to who you were when you came into the world, a spirit with unlimited potential and your innate sense of creativity and power, where it was safe to be innocent, it was safe to be curious, it was safe to seek love. So we're trying to restore all of those capabilities rather than to turn you into somebody else entirely.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that's really important, because a lot of times you'll hear people say, when I left break, I was a totally different person. And I get the feeling that would make somebody say that.
Mm,
But I do really think what happens to us in those early childhood years, it does start to chip away at us and it gets us stuck in these ruts. And then it does alter our perception of reality in a way that's very patterned.
mm,
So when you can help somebody see how their childhood experience created formulas that distort the way they see the world around them and even the way they receive people like you or I think you and I are likely very assertive, probably like humor driven, direct sort of people. If somebody didn't have a childhood that yielded that sort of output, they probably get extremely triggered by people like you and I. And does that mean that you and I are inherently like bad, evil people? No, it just means that one way that we self-express or how we show up authentic, it's pinging something in them, it's pointing out a wound. So instead of facing that sort of deficit in themselves, they're mad at what they're faced with in you or I being around
yeah.
them. So one of the things that we look at in break method is something called the brain pattern spectrum. Effectively, in the world, there's over 8 billion people. All of the body of work that we've created and all of the algorithm that we created proves that there's actually only 5 types of humans. So you can basically distill down 8 billion people into 5 primary types. There are subtypes from within that, but you can plot every single person onto this brain pattern spectrum and in 20 minutes understand with very high level accuracy, 98.3% accuracy, how somebody is going to perceive a situation in a very skewed or distorted way. That's, them, and what they're likely to do with what they just perceived. So it also will help us understand their inclination towards self-deception, what their self-deception themes are, what their underlying motivations are, even if they're really good at masking that to other people. And that's always a fun one when they've spent 20 minutes doing this online diagnostic evaluation, and then you have to sit across from them and everything that they believe they're really good at kind of act or masking, you're suddenly calling out all of those
Mm,
pieces. It's very confronting and exposing because you've spent your life trying to portray something opposite of what our system told you you are, and it's mostly correct. So we get through that phase of it and you kind of where you're plot on that spectrum, and we understand kind of how you see the world, what your underlying motivations are, what your patterns of self-deception are, and what your behavior cycles are like, we can understand a whole lot about what a person like you would do in any number of circumstances. So we use this for corporate environments for recruiting and hiring. We also use this at the organizational level to help teams understand why there's a specific breakdown happening in one of their teams. We were talking earlier about the example of somebody basically saying like, I'm afraid of my success or whatever sort of cliche
mhm.
statement that would
Yep.
be. So If we look at the brain pattern spectrum, it's divided into left and right halves. So if you were to imagine an XY axis divided in left and right halves, on the left-hand side of the spectrum, you have the more abandonment-oriented wound patterns. This typically becomes somebody who is more hyper-independent. They have higher levels of self-trust because they believed as a child that they couldn't innately trust their primary caregivers. By default, they had to learn how to trust themselves. So they become more emotionally resilient, a little bit more scrappy. And until you get to the far left side of the spectrum, typically you have somebody that reports a very high quality of life. They're self-assured, typically very work or purpose oriented. They know who they are, they know what they want to do in the world because they're not really looking to others for advice or feedback. And frankly, as you move out toward the left side, there's very little care at all for what other people think, which can be very liberating and it can be one of the markers of success. Because if you're so focused on what other people are thinking about you, the likelihood that you're going to be able to birth something that's really in its full potency is very, very up. Because you're probably going to water that down or slightly chip away at it or care about how it's packaged so as to not upset other people. So what we find is that in the center of the left side, so I'll send you a link to do brain pattern mapping and I'll do yours, but there's this rectangle on the left center. And this is where we see the highest concentration of entrepreneurs, the highest concentration of any top 1% of any industry that you can think of. I always remind people this is barring nepotism. If you're only in that role because your parents were rich, then you don't count. These are the people that had the grit and resilience to get there because they were being scrappy and they were able to sustain that on their own. We also have this other very small rectangle that's on the opposite end of the right side, where we also see a lot of entrepreneurship. But the entrepreneurs that exist on that side, it's a much smaller volume, but it's also a very different type of entrepreneur. I just from kind of your presence on social media and talking to you briefly, I'm pretty sure that you're going to be in this left side rectangle. But I will send you the brain pattern mapping so that you can do it for yourself. What ends up happening if you start to the center and you work your way out to the left is every step that you take, independence is going to increase. Self-trust is going to increase. Your desire to kind of as productive in humanity through either your work or your purpose is also going to go up. That could also lead you toward workaholism. So the further you go out toward the left, you're probably increasingly so a workaholic. And relationships can become your Achilles heel. Not that you can't do relationships, but relationships are likely to be fraught with more conflict and drama than you like. Because in general, as you move toward that left side, you don't really want drama, you just want peace. And often people, as they move all the way out to that left side, may end up in a situation where their brain is kind of this belief, like it's just here to be alone because to some extent it is, right? Like if it's just you, yourself, and I, then you don't really have to deal with other people's dysregulated emotions, their moods, because in general, people on the left side, until you get to that far left side of the spectrum, they tend to be more emotionally self-regulated. So they don't have as many of the dips and the highs as somebody on the right side of the spectrum would have. And even so, if you're moving all the way toward the center is where I have something called the circle of complacency, and people here actually can have very little variability in their personality, and they often don't like to take risk, and therefore there's very little reward either. So the center, we have a little bit of abandonment patterns and a little bit of rejection patterns. And typically when you're in the center, these are the clients that I see that have had the same job for like 30 years. They've been married for 30, 40 years. And maybe they're only coming to me because their kids just moved away to college. And now they're like, Bizzie, I don't even know who I am anymore. Because they never, self was always experienced through their role. Like, this is who I am as a mom. This is who I am as the head of the PTA. This is who I am as a wife. And then when some of those things get stripped away from you, you never really built your own identity. So often that is the work that people are coming to us to try to dig into. If you were to contrast that to the people that are on the left side, those people really have very secure identities. They know exactly who they are to a point where it probably pisses other people off. And they might need to learn better lessons about how to adapt their communication style for certain types of people, right? Because if there was kind of like a bubble for people on the left, it's kind of like but I should have to do that. Like, can't you guys just catch up? Like, why have to adopt this? Like, you need to catch up. That's not my problem that you're moody. Whereas I don't know what your relationship status is, but I was very much like that when I was younger. And I mean, even like I'm 40 now, but I was like that until I was like 35. But I'm married. I just had my 5-year wedding anniversary. And this relationship has taught me so much about that part of me that's really quick to kind of other people's moodiness and just be like, whatever, that's a you problem. And just kind of, and instead to kind of to stand in the gap with them and not necessarily like get into their downturn with them, but also not be so quick to kind of off either, but instead help them regulate through it to pull out of it. And I think that's, one of the deficits that can happen on the left side is you can be so kind of like shit efficiency oriented that some of that stuff, it's so easy to brush it away where the other person can potentially feel minimized. And that stuff as you're a parent is going to, more and more, and you have to learn, like, I have such hard edges all the time. So I've definitely personally softened over the years quite a bit, um, while still having that really secure identity intact, thank God. Right. So then let's contrast it with the right side. If I were to start in the center and I were to walk my way out to the right, because this is a spectrum, right? So all of the qualities that I just described, now they go down. So every time I go to the right, my self-trust goes down. And instead of dependence or independence leaning toward hyper-independence, now I'm actually codependent leaning toward dependent. So instead of trying to figure it out on my own, I'm very much looking to other people to help me solve a problem. I'm quick to give away my authority. I'm quick to hire a mentor. Again, in that dynamic, kind of victim oppressor dynamic, I'm hiring a mentor so that I can blame everything on you instead of take radical personal responsibility, which I think in mentorship does happen quite a bit. So there's this desire to look to somebody else to tell you what to do or to solve your problems rather than to commit and try to figure it out as you go along, which people on the left side are quite good at doing, to the point where the people on the left side tend to very much seek out novelty and can become a little bit more reckless. Yeah. Because I think, again, thought bubble wise, it's almost like, sounds like a bad idea. Why not? Like, let me see if I can doubt. Whereas on the right side, people tend to hold themselves back a little bit more. They're a little bit more discerning, but that can come at the cost of being risk averse, where then you don't want to commit unless you know exactly what's going to happen. And plot twist in this life, you can't ever know what's going to happen. So a lot of people get themselves stuck there, not being able to commit and figure it out as they go along because they somehow want to be able to control the parameters or do it perfectly if they're going to do it. So I think more likely the person that you were trying to explain before, that is probably the crux of the issue, is that they really know how to make commitments, and they're afraid that if they do commit, they're somehow not going to figure it out. And more than anything, they would rather in their mind believe in the possibility than have to face the reality that maybe they're not that good at something, or maybe they have more work to do. So I think often people cause this delay for themselves on the right-hand side of the spectrum because, like I said, it's easier if I don't try, then at least in my mind, hypothetically, like, I can influencer too. And it's like, but what if you try and fail? Then it's like that fantasy gets dashed. Whereas typically people on the left side, they're not really fantasy type people. They can be very visionary, but they're kind of like, and they're a doer. Whereas on the right side, I think people get very much addicted to the vision and the idea without the grit and the execution piece. Yeah. And when we go all the way to the farthest right side, that's where we see patterns, to the far right side, you move through a cluster where the majority of personality disorders tend to be. So things like borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, dissociative disorder, and then into the very farthest right side of the spectrum. This is typically where you see high levels of substance abuse, homelessness. I've done a lot of this work in therapeutic residential programs and with the prison system, and you do tend to see a higher concentration of that population in this very far right side of the brain pattern spectrum. And here you can start to see things not like codependency, but just full on dependency, where there's so much central themes around futility and like, why would I try, that they end up basically just letting other people care for them or for the system to care for them.
Yeah. Wow. I'm like taking my notes and there's so many things that I want to touch on. First of all of this in your methodology in a 3-year period. So there's a couple things I want to touch on because
it's been 11 years. So yeah, it's last 3 years. So going have been
all
like an intense scale, but yeah, 11
years. I mean, a lot of that, the capacity in which you've led yourself in 11 years is what most people won't do in their lifetime or their second lifetime or all of their lifetimes screwed together. So that's just incredible. One of the things that you said to me stuck out, and I kind of touch on that because I think that it's going to really resonate with our is being in the marriage that you're in now. And I've been married 3 times. So I just celebrated my 6-year anniversary with my third and final husband. Thank the sweet baby Jesus. And I just turned 39
Same
this year.
girl.
And so it's like, holy fuck. And my entire life, because, extreme daddy issues. And so my entire adult life was me leaning into that trauma and trying to find men that I could fix because I always wanted the dad that would, the way that I feel like I deserve to be loved. And so here I am in my 6th year of marriage, and I'm just honestly this year figuring out how to soften my edges because it really was, I was coming from a good place, but I was always coming from the place of like, don't fucking like it. You're not for me. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
fucking like it, my boundaries. And it's like to soften that. And it took me, I mean, so many times where I've literally dropped to my knees in surrender to God and to for something to be revealed to me. Anything. I will take anything right now. Like I permanent rug burn on my knees from surrendering to God, okay? But the year was like a year of experiencing in-depth pain going internally and really coming out the other side and being the person who is just strong in her boundaries, but soft to the point where other people actually want to be around her in other capacities besides needing something. Because obviously, with 4 children and a husband and hundreds of clients, everybody needs something from me all the time, right? But it's like now I get to actually have these deep, emotionally intelligent, and intellectual conversations with other human beings because I've softened my edges. And I really want to go into the most recent time that you had to just literally physically drop to your knees and surrender is what I'm imagining that you've done because I feel like we are very similar. Having this conversation, I'm like we're very similar, but for me it was physically just dropping to my knees, and it was one of the most painful things that I've ever done this year. And I think that going back to your point in the beginning where a lot of people look on social media, it's easy to look on social media and resonate with everybody's surface level wins and be like, wow, that would be so great, right? And even though we know that they've gone through the depths of fucking hell to get there, we don't want to believe that because then we again have to take radical responsibility, and it's easier to just live in the fantasy. Once we're stepping out of the fantasy and into the action, that requires us to actually take inventory and actually surrender on a daily basis and let go of control. And most people aren't willing to do that. And so I really would love to hear what that looked like for you and how it felt and like what your environment was like, what your support system was like. For me in the last surrender, I remember everything. I remember how the carpet felt when I dropped to my knees. I remember what I was wearing. I remember the candle that I was burning because it was such a profound moment of my life, but my evolution. So I'd love to hear your experience with that.
All of last year, I had to travel far more than I ever had in my marriage prior to that. I, from the time my oldest daughter's turning 16, I had to travel for work pretty much like all of her childhood, all of my son who's 12's childhood. But when I married Gordon, I had just sold 3 of my companies, and I pretty much for 3 years got to just stay at home for the most part. I was still always entrepreneurial, still doing things, but he got to marry a side of me that was very contrasted to who I had been able to be prior to that, which I think was definitely a God thing, and it was a blessing because that was what helped me set the foundation in my marriage for being in kind of like submitted as a wife and actually learning to prioritize and find joy in things like cleaning my house and making food and picking my kids up from school and things that I'd really never had an opportunity to do before. I genuinely went, and I feel so bad when I think about this, but my oldest daughter and son rarely ever was able to pick them up from school. I could probably think of like 8 times, but we always had a nanny. I was always working. And this started this whole new phase of my journey where I was doing all of those things and loving that I could do all those things. And I even took 2 years off of Instagram, which was like amazing years. So I think part of the reason I'm in a very different state personally and in my marriage now is because I had that time to really dig into who I am outside of the career that I've built. So to put that into perspective, I'd had all those years to be the mom, be the wife, and then all of a sudden my book came out and I went on a book tour and I was traveling all the time. And it pushed my marriage into a new level of testing than it had previously been in, because now my husband had to kind of this new sort of power dynamics of me now traveling and kind of like stages and being on podcasts all the time and just kind of in spotlight. And he hadn't really had to deal with that before. I think he knew that my life was like that previously, but he didn't have to personally confront it. So looking back when I first started to go on tour last year, I tend to talk to God in the sauna a lot. I try to go in the sauna every single night. So the sauna is kind of my time. So I was having, I feel like I was having a little bit of a pity party of like, so hard. Like, why can't I just do this and have my marriage remain stable as it was before? It's
Mm.
not fair that as I have to do this and this starts to go well, it feels like I'm being punished, right? It was kind of like pity party energy to God. I don't know about you, but at least like the that I have with God, I have a sense of humor about it. And quite
Mhm.
often when I show up with a pity party, I get rebuked pretty directly in a way that makes me laugh. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I need to cut this shit. This is ridiculous. Um, and got met with was kind of visuals of how many times in my past I've had a series of almost breakthroughs because I let my intimate relationship start to kind of away from what God positioned me to do and what I was supposed to do. So instead of continuing on mission, I then started to kind of previous husbands or like get their emotional wounds with them instead of staying focused and steadfast. So I got kind of the fire moments of all the times I had dropped the ball in previous attempts. And I just remember the sternness of the voice. You are not doing that this time. It is not your job to babysit emotions. Your job is to stay steadfast and focused, but also loving and soft and feminine and not get into the fights with
Mm.
them, but just lovingly remind them this is what I was called to do and I'm going to do it, whether no matter what sort of drama is trying to be drummed up at home, I'm going to stay focused on this because this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I kind of this very clear understanding that I was to go to my husband and say, honey, I love you. I know how hard it is on you being with 4 kids when I have to travel. I
Mhm.
that might not feel like what you're supposed to be doing as a man, and just kind of like those wounds and all of those things,
Yeah.
and say, but nonetheless, this is what I'm doing for this year. It's not going to be like this forever, but this is going to have to happen in seasons. I love you. I trust you. I know you can have my back. And I'm never going anywhere. We're going to be in it for the long haul. I'm going to die with you. But I need you to try to hold it down for me when I'm gone. It's okay to tell me that things are hard. It's okay to tell me that you're struggling, but it's not okay to try to prevent me from doing what
Mm.
I'm destined to do.
Wow.
And it was a great conversation. It was a really hard conversation for me because I'm historically terrible with boundaries. I'm much more of a people pleaser, fawner. So to have to kind of hard thing and really mean it was hard for me. I am naturally, I always know what my truth is. I'm very crystal clear, and I'm like never personally. But I think my brain's set point from childhood is to be able to scan where other people are at and kind of a can't handle this right now. So let's just not say this. So it's never that I don't know what's true in those moments for me personally. It's more like a factor of, do I think you can handle this? And in this moment, I was pretty clear that it was probably going to ruffle feathers, but it felt very clear that it was a bound. That was like one of the first boundaries that I made before the year even started. Like, here's what it is. There's nothing you can do. There's no emotional wound or button that you can push that's going to make me go back on this. This is what's happening this year. I'm committed. Basically, I love you, but out of my way, sort of thing. Um, and it was a tumultuous year in a lot of ways, but it also was a year where we had so much growth as a couple. Like, I think our marriage is as like I think it's better now than it was when we started, and it's certainly better now than it was at the beginning of our marriage. So and I love that you guys just celebrated your 6th anniversary. We just celebrated our 5-year anniversary. We've been together for 7. And it's brought up so many times where, like, to me, on my knees is like, God, don't let me back down on myself. Like, I could see the
Mm.
old me wanting to go, I'll cancel this, I'll come home, right? Like a big opportunity. And it's like
Wow.
to get into that guilt trip of like, oh, I need to do this instead of this big opportunity. I've just out on stuff like that on my career so many times to placate other people's emotions. And
Mm.
it just, I know it sounds odd, but this year it was like moments of surrender were to go to God and just say, God, give me the strength to stay focused on like where you have brought me and to not get distracted because it's so easy for me to get pulled into like mom guilt or wife guilt
Mm.
that biggest moments of surrender to me is just like, God, do not let me back down on what I'm here to do because I've backed down on myself so many. When I meet with certain types of people, this is like a very, there are two common phrases that people typically say when they meet me or they hear me speak like at a keynote or something. Number one is, wow, you're a lot shorter than I thought you would be. There's that one. I'm only 5'1". So I'm like very, very, and then the other one is, you should be way more famous than you are. Like, why are you not more famous?
Mm.
Which to me, it's a testament to exactly what I'm describing.
Yeah.
My career has kind of, many times, every single time I have trashed my own career, it's absolutely through trying to placate things in my intimate relationship.
Oof.
So as I reflect on this last year, this is the first time in my life I have not done that. And my marriage is stronger and more intimately connected than it ever has been before. And we've now gotten to a really great where there have been a couple times where to have me gone and there's that part of you that wants to feel abandoned or rejected, like you'd rather be there than
Mm.
be home with me. And those times where I see that part want to rise up in my husband, there have been times that he'll text me and be like, I love you, honey. I'm so proud of you. I'm personally struggling right now, but this is has to do with you and I can't wait to have you home. Where it's like, I can't talk right now because I don't want to be complaining to you, but I'm so on board with your mission and I love you so much. That is what I think I've been searching for. And I've also been married 3 times. Third time is a charm.
Girl,
I think
what?
that's what I've been searching for this whole time is to have a partner that isn't intimidated by me, understands who I am and the mission that I'm called to, but also recognizes the parts of me that I've so value being a wife. I love cooking for everybody. I love
Mm.
cleaning. I being able to cuddle with my husband. I love being able to go to my husband and have deep spiritual conversations. I've done so much work as an adult, especially in these later years of trying to soften into my feminine. And it's a testament to who my husband is too, because he's actually done the work too to be that grounded masculine that allows me to
Mm.
kind of be like, honey, I'm sad. Because
Oh
I
my
don't think I've
God.
ever had that relationship
I
before.
know.
I'm always just like, buck up. I'm gonna deal with it on my own. But now I can actually go to my husband and, you
Same.
know, and
It's
tell him that I,
wild.
to support me through it. Or so silly, but my closet habit that I've never, not to say never, I've been able to let go of it. I've never been like a blown smoker, but I love a good American spirit every once in a while. Just always have. It just doesn't go away. And for a long time, I kind of hid it from my husband. And during this year, when we were kind of this growth, one day my husband came to me when I was going through something really hard, and he's like, "Babe, I got you a present." And I was like, "Yeah, what's that?"
Stop it.
He got me a pack of American spirits to stash like up the top of our kitchen. And I was like, "Honey, I know this sounds ridiculous. That's the sweetest thing you've ever done for me." Like it was like the vulnerable, sweetest thing he's ever done for me. And now when shit really hits
Oh,
the fan, he's like, "Babe, do you want me to come out on the deck with you and you can have an American spirit?" I'm
that
like, "Oh
is
my
just
God."
like so. I fucking love that for you and your husband and your relationship. I feel like now that I know that we're twins, like how many kids do you have?
4.
Okay, so I have 4 kids. We're the same age. We've been in the same amount of marriages. Like, oh, it's just insane.
It's crazy.
So when are we going to dinner? Who's flying to who? And like,
Where do you live?
I'm in Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay, I'll come to you. I'm in the
Where are
middle of
you?
nowhere in North Idaho, but we love it. We live in a ski
You're in
resort
you're in
that
Idaho?
sadly right now has no snow. Yeah.
Okay, we
Yeah,
have a
so
lot.
an
We're
hour
not,
north of Coeur d'Alene.
yeah, I don't think we're that far from each other, but yeah, we'll
Not too
figure it out.
far. A
Cool.
couple, 2.5, 3 hour plane ride.
Yeah, perfect. Love it. So, the touch on the mom guilt and the wife guilt real quick, and then we can
Hmm.
wrap up because it's just being a mom and a wife and an entrepreneur than just being an entrepreneur. It's so different. And I feel like the mom guilt and the wife guilt, I've let myself use as excuses so many times to like not big fucking things too. Like, oh, I can't do that because my kid might want to go to like the patrol show that might come into town, or just be like on for my kid, my husband, and then really like subconsciously me making excuses to not push myself to that edge. But also I I feel like with the relationship that I had with my parents when I was younger, and obviously like this was me projecting onto my children for so long, but like I'm like, oh, I never want them to feel like how I felt, and just kind of like process away from them where they get to just experience me for me and not trying to do something else. But I resonated with that so much because it is so different, and so many other patterns I feel like as moms that we have to work through and redirect and navigate at being moms and successful, being a successful company owner. I mean, stretch, and it's such a stretch to not necessarily balance motherhood and entrepreneurship and being successful in your company, but just allowing it to be a ecosystem where you're not like dragging in pieces, dynamics of one piece to the other. And so I really resonated with that. And I know that a lot of our audience will resonate with that as well. I'd ask you to wrap this up though. What is an edge that you're working through right now that you feel is going to set 2026 up for success? Like, what's super fucking edgy that you're just like, this has been here before, this is unmarked territory?
It's not necessarily, so I'll try to be as succinct with this as I can. So one of the things that I have been reflecting on this last year about and thinking about is, the first bigger business in 2010. So I've roughly from 2010 to present, I've been somewhat in a like influencers category.
Yeah.
And the thing that I keep reflecting on is how many people liked me better or felt that I was like a influencer when I wasn't actually 100% the person that I was kind of playing the part of on the outside. And that interestingly enough, as I've done so much of the healing work and now I really am congruent, like I really practice what I preach and I really am what I teach and all those things, it actually agitates certain types of people more and they attack me more. And I just think that is just something that I keep reflecting on because it's wrong and unjust. Like when I was still like this messy, broken person leading, then you like loved and thought that I was the real deal. But now that I actually am congruent, like now I want to be like victimized or anti me and say that I'm not who I say I am. It's just such an interesting.
Well, people are so sensitive, and the macro, they want to relate to you. And so if you've gotten to a point that they haven't necessarily reached that point in their life where they can relate to you, like but they don't understand. And obviously our response to fear is to get angry or go into survival or fight or flight. And I feel the same way. That's one of the things that I've been reflecting on this year. So I think we're living the same life,
Yeah, I
which is
thought
pretty
that's
insane.
one of the edges, but I think kind of that comes in tandem with that is I've spent so much of my adult life and career being able to identify people who are perhaps a bit more emotionally unstable and potentially volatile. And I've spent so many years of my life kind of tiptoeing and not trying to set them off. And this last year, I've been a lot more direct about, hey, accountability, integrity, like this working, here's my boundary. If you want to do this, cool. But like it's gonna be this and this. And if not, that's okay. I'll still cheer for you. But just being a lot more clear and direct with what I can and can't do. And the fallout from that is extraordinary of the people that,
Mm.
when you do that, try to claim that you're somehow toxic or narcissistic, when the reality is I've spent, my 40 years on planet Earth doing the opposite and
Yeah.
placating people like that. So I think that's a new edge that I'm finding because as I'm clear on what I have the capacity for and what I don't and what my boundaries are, it's incredible to me how many people, instead of being able to take ownership or personal accountability, want to try to make you out to be some sort of abuser simply for saying like, if it's gonna be like this, and if not, that's cool, but I just know that I don't have the capacity for that unless it looks like this.
Yeah.
And I've never been able to do that before this last year, and it's just wild to me how many like literal that sets off.
Yeah.
That's new
Absolutely.
edge.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Busy, for joining us on the Rage Room. And for everybody listening, buck it up, Buttercup. You've got this. And I will see you on the next episode of the Rage Room.